cimetière des CD, aujourd'hui, quelqu'un d'assez spécial, pour qui j'ai beaucoup de respect, c'est le musicien new-yorkais Moby, qui fait d'excellents disques. Ça, c'est son plus récent que je vous conseille. Achetez-en 2 exemplaires. Ça, il s'appelle Play. Et son disque précédent aussi est excellent. Moby, welcome to le cimetière des CD. You're a real music lover. When did you start to buy CDs or your first interest in music?
My first interest in music, I remember being, I think, 3 years old, and I was in the car with my mother, and the song Proud Mary by Creedence Clearwater Revival came on, and I was just transfixed, and
really?
I wouldn't get out of the car until the song ended, and every time we heard it, I had to hear the whole thing.
But the records you picked are a bit more different than that one. David Byrne and Brian Eno, My Life in the Bush of Ghosts. Why this particular album?
Well, when I made this album Play, to me that was sort of like the antecedent to the record that I made, in the sense that it was combining some old vocals and old source music with newer, more rhythmic contemporary things.
And are there any, because you do a lot of ambient music, so I'm sure you've heard other Brian Eno albums.
And obviously Brian Eno and early Talking Heads was very, very influential on me. In fact, it's that period of music from about 1978 to around 1983 is probably my favorite period of music in the 20th century.
Really? A lot of people don't like that period. They say, oh, wow, the 80s, what a terrible period.
77 to 83, but you had Simple Minds, and Killing Joke, and Theater of Hate, and Talking Heads, and Mission of Burma, and Joy Division, etc. You know, it's like, so it was, to me, that was just an amazing period.
It was really a big burst of creativity, you know,
very
after
much
the 60s. Debussy, also, because you like classical music. Tell us about Debussy.
Well, Debussy's sort of like the precursors to modern, to 20th century classical music, like Debussy and Ravel. What I loved about it is, like, especially that Debussy, L'après-midi d'un faune, although my pronunciation is terrible.
D'un faune. L'après-midi d'un faune.
Yeah. What I loved about it melodically, it's just remarkable, because it really was, it was a break from the classical music that had come before it, in terms of, like, the way the chords were put together. I mean, like, the chord voicings and just the melodic structure was, for me, very, very new. And I remember the first time I heard it, I was maybe 12 years old, and it just made my stomach feel funny.
Yeah, it carries a lot of emotions.
Because it's, on one hand, it's conventional, but on the other hand, it's quite unique and idiosyncratic. I mean, the only thing I can compare it to is like having a piece of blueberry pie, and you bite it, and instead of eating blueberry pie, it tastes like flowers. Wow. And you're like, and you don't, like, it just, it's a nice taste, but it's just so different that you don't know what to do with it.
Debussy, we must have that in our collection. Something different than Debussy, not pas mal différent, même. Bad Brains. Bad Brains is a very important band.
Yeah, my favorite punk rock band of all time. They were a hardcore punk rock band from Washington, D.C., and then they moved to New York, and they were all Rastafarians. They were all black, and originally they'd started out as a jazz group, but they gave up jazz and started playing punk rock and reggae. And the interesting thing was, you'd go to see their shows, and they were such good musicians. It's like they were playing this super fast punk rock, but it was so intense, so emotional, and so well played. And then they'd play like 4 punk rock songs, and then a really slow dub reggae song, and then 4 punk rock songs and a really slow dub reggae song. So it was just so passionate and so emotional.
They've invented something. I recall the first time I bought Bad Brains, I didn't know who they were. A punk song, and the B-side was reggae.
Yeah.
Strange band. Grandmaster Flash, yeah, I'm sure he was going to pop up in your picks, because you've mentioned him a few times.
That particular song, New York, New York, the first 2 singles that Grandmaster Flash put out were The Message and New York, New York, and they were both so emotional, like lyrically and musically, like they're like mini symphonies, just these beautiful bodies of work. And I remember when I got New York, New York, I put it, this is 1982, no, actually 1983, 1984, and I was listening to it on my Walkman, walking down the street of my town, and it actually brought tears to my eyes. It was so, I mean, the lyrics are so powerful. And I love hip-hop now, but to me, in terms of the amount of work that went into these songs, and the lyrics are so emotional and so poetic, and That's why I put it on my list of 5 favorite things.
And to television, one of the first punk groups really, from New York. Yeah.
You know, the album Marquee Moon by Television. Well, there was that very interesting period in New York in the mid-'70s to the late '70s where you had Television and the Talking Heads and Blondie and Suicide and all these wonderful, wonderful bands. But Marquee Moon, just some of the songs on it are so beautiful. And again, like, I don't really like guitar solos, but Tom Verlaine's guitar solos, and he named himself after Verlaine, the poet, the French poet. His guitar solos were just amazing. I mean, be so beautiful and intricate, and you know, like, because musicianship, you know, with some heavy metal guy going, it's like, it's hard to get too emotionally involved in that.
Yeah.
But his guitar solos are very classical, very poignant.
Well, okay, we'll have to check that album, Marquee Moon by Television. And what is the next album you're going to buy, if you buy albums?
If I was going to go out and buy an album right now, you know, I don't mean to sound old-fashioned, but I've really been wanting to get the Rolling Stones' greatest hits. Because I don't.
You don't have any Stones album at home?
I have all the Stones on vinyl.
Okay.
But I don't have anything on CD. And lately, I've really been wanting to hear some of like the early things, like As Tears Go By. And just, yeah, so I think I'm going to have to go out and buy Rolling Stones' greatest hits, because you can't have a music collection that doesn't have Rolling Stones' greatest hits in it.
That's true. Thanks a lot, Moby.
Oh, my pleasure.
Bye-bye.